In this video, I'm going to introduce and explain the specific terminology that you will need for this task, and suggest a broad structure for answering the question. In subsequent videos, I'll go through past exam papers so that you can see how this is applied to actual examples. Paper 1 Question 3 assesses part of Assessment Objective 2, or AO2, or how the writer has structured a text. The part assessing language is covered in questions 2 and 4, so is not relevant here. The question has 4 elements. It will always start, "You now need to think about the whole source." The key words here are whole source. If you only talk about the beginning and the middle, you won't be able to access the higher grades. You should aim to talk about the beginning and the end, and at least one point in the middle. It continues. The text is from, and will then give you a context to where the source is taken from within the novel or short story. For example, the text is from the beginning of a novel. You can use this information to direct your thinking about the extract. Beginnings of stories introduce characters, settings, plots, and themes, while endings tend to provide a resolution or a conclusion, although they can be ambiguous, leaving us with uncertainty, perhaps in the form of unanswered questions or a cliffhanger. It will always then continue, how has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? The key words and phrases here are structured and interest you as a reader. This reminds you that your focus is on structure, not language, that there are no specific right or wrong examples, and that you have the freedom to choose what you analyse. It is, however, also there to remind you that you need to consider how structural features engage you as a reader. The final part of the question will always read, you could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, any other structural features that interest you. The key words here are what, how and why, and changes, although I would also add where, which is hinted at in the phrase, as the source develops. The question is worth 8 marks, which means that you have approximately 10 minutes to answer it. This type of question, focusing purely on structure, was introduced with the new specifications in 2015, which were first examined in 2017. The analysis for this question is markedly different from that required for questions 2 and 4, which focus on the effects of language, and is therefore almost completely different from the type of analysis that you will have been used to doing for most of your school career up to this point. The consequence of this change of focus was that early exam results showed a significant number of students unable to access the higher grades, because their analysis was focused on the wrong features of the text. And AQA issued a document as part of their Further Insight series entitled GCSE English Language, How Structure is Assessed, and it is to this that I'll refer as we go along. What you are not required to do is get into the finer details of what effect the particular language choices that the writer has made have on the reader. If you do, you will not be rewarded for this. The AQA guidance states that the most successful students understood that the story was a construct. This means that you need to show your awareness that a story is fundamentally different from real life in that the writer has made deliberate choices with regard to how and when information is revealed to the reader. What you are required to do is to look at how the text has been constructed, or how the structural features of the text fit together. To put it more simply, what happens where and why, and how this affects our understanding as readers. You need to ask yourself the question, How does reading about this at this point in the text add to my understanding of the source as a whole? Not only will this require a different kind of thinking, but it will also require a different kind of terminology. Even when students have covered aspects of structure in class, from my own experience, they often slip back into language analysis because under exam pressure, this is what feels comfortable and familiar. We're so used to putting individual words and phrases under the microscope, labelling them as similes and metaphor, and thinking about their meanings and connotations, that it can feel quite alien to take a step back and look at how the individual elements of a piece of writing fit into the larger picture of what we're reading, and how where something is placed can have just as much impact on our understanding as the way in which it is said. First, we're going to look at the what part of what, where and why. I'm going to explain what these elements are and then give you the questions you should be asking yourself. Setting. This could include the physical place, the time period, the time of year, the time of day, or even the kind of weather in which the story is set. The way in which a setting is described can create a mood or atmosphere, or can go on to enhance our understanding of a character, for example through the use of pathetic fallacy. Does the description of the setting contain any hints about what will happen later? Character. Writers can describe one or more characters. They might focus on what they're thinking and feeling, or on what they're doing. Is there something that the writer chooses to reveal about the character at that particular point that takes on a special significance later in the extract? Writers can introduce images, ideas and themes. Images and ideas can take on special significance if they are revisited and or developed as the text progresses. A recurrent image, word or action is called a motif and can help to illustrate the larger themes of the work. Backstory. This is also referred to as exposition. It helps to reveal important information about the main characters and the events of the world in which they live, which has happened before the narrative starts. It can help us to understand a character's motivations for speaking or acting in the way they do, either due to something inside of them or because of the external situation. Exposition in good writing is used sparingly, as otherwise it runs the risk of becoming what's known as an information dump, which is boring and switches readers off. Skillful writers will provide just enough backstory to allow the reader to make sense of a character's actions at the time. George Orwell cleverly does this at the start of his dystopian novel 1984, where he uses his protagonist's journey towards his flat and what he does when he gets home to interweave narrative with backstory. In this way, the narrative is able to progress, while simultaneously revealing details about a world which is both horrifyingly different, yet horrifyingly similar to our own. Dialogue. This comprises the spoken interactions between two or more characters. When dialogue is used successfully, it either develops our understanding of character, perhaps revealing two potentially opposing motivations and perspectives, or serves to advance the plot. Also, because each new speaker starts a new paragraph, dialogue adds white space to the page and it can often feel like the pace has speeded up. How is our understanding of what the writer reveals through the dialogue affected by what we've already learned? Does it contain any hints of what may happen in the future? Now that we've covered the what, we're going to take a look at what we mean by where and why. The AQA guidance states that structural features can be at a whole text level, e.g. beginnings, endings, perspective shifts, at a paragraph level, e.g. topic change, aspects of cohesion, and at a sentence level when judged to contribute to the whole structure. The most successful candidates looked for patterns and were able to make links and connections between different parts of the source. And they explored contrasts and juxtaposition of both ideas and tone. Beginnings can relate to the first paragraph or the first few paragraphs of the text. The questions we need to ask ourselves here are, what does the writer focus our attention on at the start? Are we introduced to character, setting, and/or themes? And does the writer establish a particular mood or atmosphere? Stories often, but not always, start with exposition or backstory, which, just to remind you, is information about the characters and the world they inhabit before the start of the story. They can also start in medias res, which is a Latin term for in the middle of things. This could be a car chase, for example, or simply somebody making themselves a cup of tea. If a story starts with dialogue, this is often a good indication that the story has started in medias res. Does the writer make use of foreshadowing, where they give us an advance hint of what is to come later? This can help to interest us as readers as we develop expectations about what will happen. However the story starts, though, the writer is going to give you information about the characters or the setting or the theme that will be vital in our understanding of what happens later. Endings can relate to the closing paragraph or paragraphs of the extract. How does the end relate to the beginning? Is the structure circular? Is there repetition and/or development of an idea, a theme, or an image? Do we now see this in a new light because of what has happened in between? Does the text offer the reader some kind of resolution? Have your feelings as a reader changed? Have all your questions been answered, or are there still some remaining? Looking at the ending can feel in some ways quite artificial, as the text has often been taken from the beginning of a source, so the ending has been chosen by the exam board, not the author. That being said, it has been carefully selected so that you will be able to make the kind of connections I've outlined above. Perspective shifts relate to what goes on in between the beginning and the end. Do we see characters or actions from a different perspective? Does our focus narrow so that we see things in more detail? Or does it widen so that we're able to see the bigger picture? How does our understanding change because of this? Writers often use flashback as a technique to help us to better understand the current events or a character's motivation, as we re-evaluate our first impressions and opinions in light of this new information. Does the writer use a third-person omniscient narrator to describe events from multiple and perhaps opposing viewpoints? The guidance also refers to topic change at paragraph level. The easiest way to look for a shift in focus is when a new paragraph begins, because paragraphs are designed to organise our writing by topic. Sometimes, however, a shift in focus is signalled or forewarned at the end of the previous paragraph, which can be an effective way to change the mood, to add a sense of tension, or to change our expectations. My advice, however, would be not to get too bogged down in looking at the structure at paragraph level unless you are extremely confident. Sources may have about 9 or 10 paragraphs, and there is a danger that you will go from paragraph to paragraph, run out of time, and not get round to the ending. Look for major shifts in focus. It might be, for example, that the writing neatly divides itself up into 2 rough halves, so you would be able to talk about the beginning, the shift near the middle, and the end. The guidance also refers to structural features at sentence level when judged to contribute to the whole structure. What this basically means is that if you look at a sentence, you should consider the significance of where it has been placed in the source. Why is it at that particular point? And how that develops our understanding of the text as a whole. For this particular point, I'm going to use an example from the novel To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee to show you what this means in practice. In the first chapter, Lee makes use of this short single-sentence paragraph. That was the summer that Dill came to us. This one sentence is an important structural feature which has a number of functions. It comes after quite a lengthy section of backstory in which the narrator, Scout, tells us all about her family and her relationships with them and about how absolutely nothing ever happens in the town where she lives. Not only does this sentence bring the backstory to an abrupt halt and signal that the narrative, the actual story, is about to start, but its standing alone on the page also hints that this is a watershed moment in her life, that perhaps what happens this summer will shake the sleepy town of Maycomb that we've learnt about up to this point to the core, and further indicates how central the character of Dill is going to be to that story. Writers sometimes withhold information early on, dropping hints and clues without revealing everything at once. This creates ambiguity and mystery, which is only cleared up later on. This can interest us as a reader because it helps to build up our expectations as we wonder what their true meaning is. We then get the satisfaction of the aha moment when everything becomes clear. In terms of the actual building of a response, the AQA guidance states that the most successful students offered an overview of the structure of the whole source before breaking it down into its constituent parts and analysing the shifts in perspective and focus in a way that clearly explored their significance. An overview is a short description providing general information but no details. In other words, you are answering the question, in one or two sentences, how is this piece structured? Once you have briefly and generally talked about the structure of the piece as a whole, you should then go on to focus on a few specific examples that support the claims you've made in your overview sentence. A typical answer might go as follows. Paragraph number 1. One or at the most two overview sentences. Then, what do we focus on at the beginning? What do we learn? What is the mood or tone? Is there foreshadowing? How does the writer hope to interest us by starting the text in this way? Paragraph number 2a. Shift in perspective, focus, mood number 1. What have we shifted to? How and why? How does this link with the rest of the source? Refer back, and then consider expectations. Why is this significant? Do we come to any realizations? Paragraph number 2b, if you have time or if it's relevant. Shift in perspective, focus, mood number 2. What have we shifted to? How and why? How does this link with the rest of the source? Refer back and consider expectations. Why is this significant? Do we come to any realizations? Paragraph number 3. What do we focus on at the end? Are there links with the beginning? Is there repetition and or development of any ideas, images or themes? Why is this significant? How are we left feeling at the end? Only include paragraph number 2b if you are confident that you have the time to do it justice. 3 well-written paragraphs that cover the whole arc of the piece are better than 4 paragraphs that are less detailed or, even worse, only paragraphs 1, 2a and 2b because you've run out of time for paragraph 3. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.